Good morning, pastel friends. Today I think it might be interesting to see a plein air piece. This was a plein air piece that I did down at Red River Gorge last fall. And this is the reference photo here, and this is another reference photo. Um, I like this piece, but I feel like it's distracting between what's going on down here and what's going on up here. But I like it so much that I'm not willing right now to just sacrifice it to a studio piece, by messing around with it so much. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to do two small ones, one from this reference photo and one from this reference photo, with the inspiration of the colors on this one. And so then I'll show you all the process. Well, here's the two color studies. I'm not sure exactly resolved my issue or not. The one on the left, I left the big rock in on the left side, which kind of helps balance off the left side. The one on the right, I removed the rock. But the one on the right still has the conflict between the light Ripley colors in the bottom of the painting and then the light at the distance. There might actually be just a painting just of right there. Get rid of all that stuff. That could be a horizontal painting instead of a vertical. Good morning, everybody. This is a good morning to be in the studio this morning. It's all snowy and icy outside, which lets a lot of good light into the studio. What I'll be working on today is this larger version of this little color study. This was the one that I did earlier, trying to decide which one I liked better. I think I like both of them a lot, so I'll probably do both of them as 11 by 14 larger ones. And I'm going to do it just in clips of step by step rather than videos, because that'll move it along a little faster. And remember, with YouTube, you can always stop it at some point. If you're following along with me, stop it and then you can catch up with me. Okay, so what we've got now is the underpainting. I did it with NuPastels. That's the set of NuPastels pieces that I used so far. This is that dark, very dark blue, Prussian blue, something like that. I block in where the darks are going to be, trying to make the darks kind of flow up through the creek like that, so they're not all the same. You don't want this whole side of darks to be the same as this side. That's too symmetrical. And this is where the light is going to be, right through here. I wanted to move the light a little bit off center so that you also have less symmetry there. I blocked in the sky with this pink just because I want to have the blue sky have a little bit of something to contrast against when I put the blue in there. And it's also kind of a placeholder, so I just know that this is going to be the shape of the blue sky and this is the shape of the reflections. Now when you're right down on the creek, on the edge of the creek, reflections are generally about the same height. So if we've got this much light reflecting, then we have this much light up above and this much light reflected. The woods goes on, the trees go on a little bit higher here, so your reflection would be deeper there. I just gently blocked in with this kind of olive green, the greens that will be going here, as you can see. I don't know if you can see that part or not. Yeah, you can see it. I think that's all. The sand is just sort of it's almost a non-color. That's the sand throughout this whole process has been a little bit of a challenge as to what color to make it. So I blocked it in with this kind of tan NuPastel and a bit of a pale lavender new pastel. Unless you have the set of 96, you probably won't have that color in there. But remember, this is just the underpainting. So just get your values right. Even if you don't have this really dark blue, you can block it in with a black. Just don't push down too hard. This is a UArt 400 paper, and I colored it with acrylic paint, very thin down acrylic paint. I think it was raw umber is the color of the paint I did. As you could see in that still shot of my pastels, that's not meant to discourage you from doing pastels. I've been collecting them for years and years and years, but they're all mixed in there together, so I can't tell you which brand I'm using because they're all mixed in. I would guess this one is super soft and very dark. It's probably a Terry Ludwig dark. And this one might possibly be a Jack Richardson, because I just recently bought some new ones of those. But these are the darks that I've used to continue to, once it's blocked in with the new pastel, then I use the softer pastels and I start going again back into the darks. Pastel's better if you go from dark to light, and it works better if you go from large shapes into smaller details. You don't want to get all the detail in here yet. So block in your larger shapes, and then we'll come back and ooch in to these shapes later on with the blue to create more detail. So this is the first part of the soft pastels working with the darks. Now in this part, I quickly added a little more of this new pastel brown into the water. In Kentucky, we have a lot of sediment in the water that makes the rocks and such underneath brown. It's not that the water's brown, generally it's not. But in these creeks up in Red River Gorge, the water's nice and clear, but you can see down through the water into the rocks and the sediment down below. And also it's kind of nice because it warms it up. Now, as far as reflections go, your camera is that you take the pictures, it's going to lie to you. You can't see it right now, but the camera is going to make the reflections equal as far as dark. Generally, though, if you're really looking at it, the dark reflections will reflect lighter, and the light reflections will reflect darker, which means these reflections here should be a little darker. And what that does is it helps make your reflections closer to the, so what that does, it brings the value closer. The darks and the lights will be a closer value to each other. There'll be more contrast up here, which is good because then it won't be so equal between what's up here and what's down below. That way your eye will know that, this kind of move past this and come into here. Now the other thing, I just said, don't put a lot of details in, but the trees, where the trees are, is going to make a big difference in your composition, where you will put your lights and darks. So I like to take the new pastel on the side like this, on the edge, and you can draw those nice straight woodsy trees in with the edge of the new pastel. And remember, when you're putting in trees, they grow naturally, so no one planted them. Definitely not in Red River Gorge, they didn't plant them. So they're like telephone poles. We need to vary where your trees are. And see, then this would have a little more of a reflection down from those trees down this way. Here's what I'm talking about, the camera. This is the photograph that I took down at Red River Gorge at Indian Creek. And as you can see, these colors and these colors are just almost exactly the same in the photograph. And what I want is a difference between these colors. These colors will be more dull and less contrast than what's going on up here. Now, one thing that the camera often does do correct here in eastern part of the United States, the sky reflections. The sky here in the reference photo is very light, and it does reflect darker, more of the actual sky color in the water. I believe what happens is I think the camera kind of washes out, because this is really almost white. It washes out the very lights, but it gives you this more acceptable color down here and below. So I got the sky in lighter and the reflections darker. This is still fairly loose as far as the final design. And these are the colors that I used in the sky. You see that little warm cream color? I put the cream color here. We have a lot of atmosphere, a lot of lightening of the sky as it gets down close to the horizon line here because of humidity and stuff. So now I'm working on the sand and gravel. So now I'm working on the sand and gravelly part of the scene. So these are the colors that I've used. Got a purple here for the shadowy part of the gravel. These are the warm grayish colors, and then I came in, this is a blue earth kind of tan color to add just a little more warmth to it. You don't always have to follow what's in the photograph, but one thing that helped me is this is the plein air piece that I did down at the gorge last fall. And I knew the gravel was going to be a problem, so I really looked carefully at the color I was seeing when I was down there and tried to mimic that color. And it's a neutral. It's got a lot of gray in it. And, you know, this, I probably, when I get done with everything, I might have to quiet this down a little bit, put in some more grays. One thing I wanted to show you is that, you can see that color there? See those funny little flecks? This is a homemade gray. You can do that. You can take your little pastel nubs, smash them together, and then I take rubbing alcohol, put a tiny bit of rubbing alcohol into that smashed up bunch of pastels, and roll it out like we used to roll out snakes, you know, like we used to roll out snakes with clay and Play-Doh. So you roll it out, let it dry, and then break it apart into smaller pieces. It's kind of fun. Now, sometimes, like with that one gray, see that little piece of blue there? Sometimes when you're using it, the roughness of the little extra pieces don't go in the right spot. But that's okay. Makes it more interesting. So here's the final piece, reflections, evening reflections at Indian Creek. I think that's what I'll call it. While I was off camera, I added a little more to the blue reflections. I took the sand that's on the right side, right here. I pushed it back a little bit because I needed these dark reflections to come down through here so that the sky reflections didn't bump up into the sand like it did here. The sand gritty part's not the important part of the painting. The important part of the painting is right here. So you want the most contrast back here. I didn't want a lot of contrast between this shape and the sky reflection. I changed this area a little bit so that it didn't seem like such a rectangular area of light. I think I'll also have to come back later and work on this light part of the sky and the light part of the top of the trees. There needs to be a little more contrast between that. Those are the kind of things that it's good to go out of the room for a while. You come back in and you say, oh, I see that's a little bit of a problem area. So I think that's it for Indian Creek Reflections, fall, evening, whatever I called it. Hope you enjoyed it. A little more tweaking. I moved this little section of sand back a little bit because I didn't want the end of the gritty part of the bank, this part, and this part, to end at the same spot. And in doing that, I changed these reflections a little bit, and I added a little more contrast between the top of the sky and the top of the trees. So here's the final version and the color studies from Reflections at Indian Creek. I hope you enjoyed following along and look for some more videos soon.